Mr. Carpenter, please call the roll.
Senators Aguilar, Baumgardner, Cook, Coram, Court, Crowder, Donovan, Thinberg, Fields, Garcia, Gardner, Guzman, Hill, Holbert, John, Jones, Kagan.
Excused.
Kafalis, Kerr, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Martinez Jimenez, Merrifield, Moreno.
Excused.
Neville, Priola, Scott, Smallwood, Sonnenberg. Tate. Todd. Williams. Zinzinger. Mr. President.
Here. Morning roll calls, 33 present, 0 absent, 2 excused. We have a quorum. Senator Donovan, please come and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the chamber please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal. What is that piece of paper you have there, Senator Priola?
私は何十な1017年4月25日金曜日のジャヌールの読書ガチャ先生ジャヌールは少しの寿司へと人初任のされると今月のす。
There's no discussion or debate on this motion. I'm sorry, Senator Court. You have heard a motion. We're going to assume it said something like what we usually hear with yesterday's date. You know. You have heard a motion of sorts. Is there any objection to this motion of sorts? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Please add Senators Moreno and Kagan to the roll. Committee reports.
April 25th, 2017, Committee on Finance. After consideration on merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1242 be postponed indefinitely. April 24th, 2017, the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology has had under consideration, had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirmed. Members of the Pinnacle Insurance Board of Directors, effective August 31st, 2016, for a term expiring January 1st, 2021. Geraldine Ann Lewis Jenkins of Denver, Colorado, serves as an employee of an employer as liability insured by Pinnacle appointed. For terms expiring January 1st, 2022, Howard L. Carver of Silverthorne, Colorado, has experience in management and operation of insurance companies not competing with Pinnacle Insurance, reappointed. Jeffrey L. Cummings of Arvada, Colorado, an employer whose liability is insured by Pinnacle Insurance, reappointed.
Senate Services.
Correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 271 and 291, Senate Memorial 3. Correctly re-engrossed, Senate Bill 281 and 287, Senate Concurrent Resolution 1. Correctly revised, House Bill 1004 and 1190. Correctly revised, House Bill 1057, 1082, 1165, 1176, 1246, and 1304. Correctly enrolled, Senate Bill 17, 132, 215, 244, 256, and 262.
Assistant Majority Leader Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions and memorials, including SJR 17038, SJR 17042, and Memorial SMJ 17002.
The motion before the body is to proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions and memorials. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we will proceed out of order. Consideration of resolutions. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title of the Senate Joint Resolution 38?
Senate Joint Resolution 38 by Senator Tate and Representatives Carver and Janal concerning the designation of May 2017 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Joint Resolution 38 and ask that a portion of it be read aloud.
Mr. Carpenter.
Senate Joint Resolution 38 by Senator Tate and Representatives Carver and Janal concerning the designation of May 2017 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. Whereas the month of May marks the traditional start of motorcycle riding season, and whereas motorcycles occupy a significant place in Colorado and American history, having made contributions to numerous military campaigns, law enforcement operations, and the culture of the American West. And whereas over 8 million motorcycles are registered in the United States, with over 190,000 registered in Colorado, and are used on public roads and highways, providing reliable day-to-day transportation and recreational opportunities. And whereas, because of their lightweight, fuel efficiency, and low impact on our highways, motorcycle use should be encouraged as a viable transportation alternative. And whereas, motorcycles take up less space on our highways and parking areas, thus reducing traffic congestion. And whereas, motorcyclists are provided legal access to federally funded high-occupancy vehicle lanes for increasing traffic flow while giving motorcyclists a safer environment for travel. And whereas, riders and passengers of motorcycles face countless hazards and unforeseen circumstances on the road. And whereas 125 motorcyclists were killed on Colorado roadways last year. And whereas state and national Share the Road campaigns have been created to remind drivers of other vehicles and all motorists to be extra alert in order to increase motorcyclists' safety. And whereas studies show that many motorcyclists involved in accidents were without formal rider training. And whereas many causes of motorcycle crashes may be attributed to lack of experience or failure to appreciate the unique operating characteristics and limitations of motorcycles, as well as the failure of other motorists to share the road with motorcyclists. And whereas the motorcycling community has made an ongoing commitment to increasing awareness of appropriate safety measures and increased participation in rider training programs.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased to offer the resolution. Motorcycle safety is important. I and by all means, please be seated on this very solemn resolution. Motorcycle safety is important. I myself have an old 1981 BMW that I used to ride quite more than I do now. A couple reasons. Number one, my own motorcycle riding capabilities have somewhat deteriorated, my own skills. Also, road, here in Colorado at least, things are hazardous. So there's concerns I have personally, training, riding, operating a very fun to ride machine, but that is fraught with hazard. And two, riding a machine in a very difficult environment. So safety, in my mind, is critical. We do have rider safety programs, rider training programs in Colorado, and in a moment we'll introduce some folks from one program. But I'm just glad knowing how important motorcycle riding is to Colorado and Coloradans, the Western culture, the open air, that we are making safety itself a key part of that culture. And ask for your support of the resolution.
Senator Todd, I think, is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to many of our motorcycle enthusiasts this morning. I rise in support, excuse me, of this important resolution. And I say it's important because oftentimes we are sharing the road with more than a four-wheeled vehicle, and the awareness of the safety that is so important for our bicyclists, but also our motorcyclists. Now, most of the time we can hear the motorcyclists because they rev it up. And at one point, I asked one of my good friends over here, why do you do that? And they said, so you know I'm there. So you know that we are present on the road. I'm really proud to have carried the renewal of MOST, which is the Motorcycle Safety Training Program, with my good friend, the senator from Sulphur Springs. And I want to say publicly, how much I do appreciate the amount of time and effort that many of you spend down here at the Capitol. You have changed my way of thinking. When I pull up next to a motorcyclist on the street, I wave and I smile. And part of that is a way of saying, I am your friend, I'm with you. And it is because of the education you have provided for me and that you have given me in terms of an understanding of how important that is. If you want a real taste of being in a motorcycle environment, I invite you to come to Aurora, to the Piper Inn. They're the best wings, right? The best wings, but also the best company. And the motorcyclists are good people, and I'm so pleased that this resolution has been brought forward. I know that at the beginning of session, we started having conversations about safety, and one of the most important things, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but that was brought up was texting and driving, and how that really does put many of our riders in jeopardy for safety. And so I'm so pleased that probably the next speaker is going to talk a little bit more about that. But again, welcome to the Capitol. Once again, this is your home, and you're here not quite as much as the rest of us, but a lot of the days you are. And it's because of your advocacy and your education that I count you as a friend, and thank you, and rise in support of this important resolution. Thank you.
Senator Court.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as the good senator from Aurora just said, when I first started working on the texting while driving bill, I was not aware of the impact that behavior had on motorcyclists. But when we went to the committee to present that, and the cyclists came down to say, this behavior of other motorists texting while driving is killing us, I perked up and I listened and I made a bunch of new friends, just as the good senator from Aurora has said. I am so pleased to support this Motorcycle Safety Awareness Senate Joint Resolution, because it is crucial that we respect and recognize how important your safety is and how much we in four-wheel drive vehicles or four-tire vehicles realize that we impact you too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for this resolution. I wholeheartedly support it.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate having a moment to speak to this issue, which I most heartily support. Safety is an important issue, and when it comes to those who are on a two-wheeled vehicle, it's critically important. But I'm also reminded of another word that most enthusiasts of the two-wheel variety of vehicles speak of to me, and that is the word freedom. Freedom is really characteristic of those who enjoy the motorcycle on the road, and I am always aware that we need to defend that as well. So sometimes the two can be counterproductive, safety and freedom, but we need to have them both. And I appreciate that. And you know, last year we got to convince CDOT that a motorcycle is an HOV vehicle, no questions asked, no switchable passes required. They are recognizes that in Colorado law, as they have been in federal law for some time, and I appreciate this resolution we have before us, because yes, safety, yes, freedom, yes to the motorcyclists in Colorado.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I too rise in support of this resolution that designates May 2017 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. A couple of things I'd like to add real quickly, and a few little-known facts about myself as they pertain to motorcycles. But first of all, I don't think this has been mentioned, but when we're on the highway in a vehicle and there are motorcyclists on the highway, it's important to give them even much more space than you would perhaps an automobile. So that's something I wanted to make sure that people were aware of. To give, if you're following a motorcyclist on the highway, to make sure that there's more than adequate space as that person is a lot closer to the road. And the things I wanted to share about myself, one is that I actually have a motorcycle endorsement on my driver's license. My brother, who lives in New York, is a big Harley Davidson fan, and I know it's hard to believe, I've ridden Harleys, and as long as they're low riders, I can touch the ground and hold the bike up. And in the arena of safety, I learned that you don't want to ride a Harley Davidson in shorts because the tailpipes can get quite hot. And if anyone's interested, I'm happy to show you the burn on my ankle on the right leg. But I don't think anyone is interested.
No.
Finally, the last little-known fact about myself is that it was back in the 80s. I actually did an Easy Rider kind of adventure, only it was on a 280, I think it was like a 300 Kawasaki, and I rode from Colorado to New York, so I did a cross-country trip. And I would recommend that you not travel cross-country on a 300 Kawasaki. And I believe the sponsor of this resolution indicated that he owns or owned a 1981 BMW motorcycle. Much better to take a BMW cross-country than a 380 Kawasaki. Thank you.
Senator Hill.
Thanks, Mr. President. You know, this can be fun and all. We do these resolutions, and we all want to say nice things about our guests and motorcycle safety and all, but I just want to set the record straight. These aren't all nice people over here. And I have a bone to pick, Mr. President, with some of them. It was my junior year at the Air Force Academy, and I was convinced I was going to learn to ride the motorcycle that I may or may not have purchased as a cadet when I wasn't supposed to have one. Went to motorcycle safety, the ABATE class over at Pikes Peak Community College, spent Saturday and Sunday on the safety training course, and Sunday afternoon, word had got out to my commanding officer that I'd been riding motorcycles all weekend. And Mr. President, I'm telling you, these guys cost me the next 3 weekends of my life. The next 3 weekends, I was wearing a suit, our service dress, our Class A's, sitting in detention for Saturday and Sunday. And that was 3 Sundays in April. And so while my wife is grateful when we rode away from our wedding on a motorcycle together and all the time I've spent on a motorcycle and the safety that has created, there may be some people that are grateful, Mr. President, but I still resent those 3 weekends that I lost in service dress at the Air Force Academy.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly rise in support. Back in the spring of 1981, as a college student, I was down on South Broadway on a morning very much like today, and a gentleman pulled out of the liquor barn from behind a beer truck. And the first time he saw me on my motorcycle, traveling south in the left-hand lane, when I was about 3 feet away from the driver's side door, and his startled expression looked up. I T-boned his station wagon, somersaulted over the front. As he slammed on the brakes, I slid down the long hood of that Buick, I think. Slid down the asphalt. It hurt. And when I opened my eyes, no helmet, by the way, the bumper of that vehicle was over my head and the left front tire was next to my ear. He jumped out of the car and apologized and said he didn't see me. I still ride today, but I don't forget that moment, that interaction. Just one brief interaction where a driver was more attentive to being at a liquor store at 10 o'clock in the morning than watching out for someone on a motorcycle. Maybe some in the chamber had wished it happened differently, but I wouldn't be here if it had happened differently. No, it's okay. I meant out there. The minority leader says we'd be stuck with the assistant majority leader if that were the case. I am grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to my friend Tiger Chandler, who was recognized recently, a few years ago, at the Motorcycle Hall of Fame up in Sturgis for her leadership for motorcycle safety and riders here in Colorado. If you don't ride, I encourage you to get a helmet and discover the freedom, the smells, the aromas, to fly down or at the speed limit, travel down a state road in Colorado as the sun rises in the east and a hawk matches your pace at 60, 55, 65 miles an hour. 75-ish maybe in some places. To smell the junipers, to smell the flowers, to hear the sounds. Get out and experience Colorado on a motorcycle. If you haven't done that, you're missing a huge opportunity in life. But please do wear a helmet. And whether you're on 2 wheels or 4 or more, look twice. Please look twice. It's worth it. Just this week, traveling home, I saw a driver in a vehicle coming the other direction make a left-hand turn as a motorcycle passed me on the right. And the motorcyclist had a gesture to tell that driver he was number 1 in that rider's book. But the rider was going too fast in the right-hand lane, and the driver of the vehicle coming at us, turning left in front of that rider, probably didn't see that rider. So for the motorcyclists out there, let's be in control too. If you're over the speed limit, if you're driving crazy, if you're cutting in and out of traffic, how are they supposed to see us? Rise in support of the resolution. I'm so grateful to be here today to share it with you. Ask for an aye vote.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I usually don't talk on motorcycle resolutions or bills, but motorcycle safety is extremely important, not just for the rider, but for all public safety. About 12 years ago, when my second grandson, 2 weeks after my second grandson was born, my oldest son was in a very severe motorcycle accident. Some of you have met my oldest son. He has come taken pictures of the Capitol. He took the photograph that hangs up in the Joint Budget Committee conference room. Very accomplished electrical engineer. He was probably one of, I would say, the top 10 engineers on deep space astronomy telescopes in the world as a young man. As a college student, he won the International Electrical Electronic Engineers Robotics, Collegiate Robotics Championship for Northeast United States, and very promising career. He was also a motorcyclist. He had a Yamaha XR7X crotch rocket, which is very, very fast. It's probably about the fastest motorcycle in Arizona at that time when he was living in Tucson. And he was also on a stunt team. His stunt team was called the Four Horsemen. They went to church groups and school groups to talk about motorcycle safety, of always obeying traffic laws, of always being aware of the motorcycles in front of you and the other lanes, and just as an outreach to our youth, would try to set the best example for them. And part of being on that stunt team was the ethic that you never violate the traffic laws. And they never did. You always wear armor and helmets and the safest things that you can, especially when you're doing something dangerous like stunting and wheelies and stoppies and other pretty high performance type of techniques on motorcycles. Unfortunately, as I said, 2 weeks after his oldest son was born, he was just driving home from his engineering office and was on Interstate, I think it's Interstate 10 that drives through Tucson. It was toward the end of the day. There was a lot of haze, and the van coming up behind him did not see him in the traffic, apparently. He was very well trained, very disciplined, that as you come to a stop, you always check your rear view mirrors. And in his rear view mirror, he thought to himself, this van is not going to stop. And it didn't. So he immediately, just because of his muscle memory, started doing a wheelie through the traffic and got hit in the back at 38 miles an hour. There's no protection for that. The motorcycle was bent in half, and the whole frame of a very rigid, very large motorcycle was completely bent in half. He was vaulted and rolled about 120 feet down the asphalt. And he could remember seeing the ground going by, seeing it, remembering that his head hit the ground. And because the armor that he was wearing, the nylon protective vests and clothing and the helmet that he was wearing, he was taken to the hospital, he was dazed, and he was released that evening with a Band-Aid on his elbow. That was it. Unfortunately, he also had some latent neurological damage. We have had him at University of Colorado Anschutz Hospital, where they have some of the best electrophysiologists that we know of in the country, and he was diagnosed with a condition called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is connected to the nervous system. And because of that condition, he had to eventually give up his career. He tried to do things like photography, but is really crippled and disabled over a 12-year period because other people weren't paying attention. Motorcycle safety is something we have to respect. And just as we have observed that our new laws and our focus on safety around emergency vehicles, which have resulted, not our laws, but our negligence in those things that have resulted in the loss of life of our first responders, our police and state patrol forces, motorcycles are similar. They're smaller, and sometimes they're not following the law either. When they dart out between cars and so forth, they're taking unnecessary risks. But when they're not doing that, when they're following the traffic laws, we need to respect and provide a barrier around all those riders to protect their lives and the lives of their families. Since that time, my son has a family of, he counts for 4 of my grandsons now, 4 out of 6. But it has affected him. It's affected their livelihood. He cannot keep a job because he cannot go to work every day because of this disabling condition. And that was because the negligence and the lack of respect for motorcycles that happens too often on our roads and freeways. So I thank the bill sponsor for bringing this. We sometimes think of this as just sort of an automatic thing we do every year or every so often, is to have these memorials. But I just wanted to mention that this is a very, very important issue that does result in maiming and loss of life unless we're more cautious about our fellow drivers. Thank you.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleagues for their remarks. Having and riding a motorcycle is fun, and I think in an ideal world, we're all having fun. Automobile drivers are 100% cognizant of all motorcycles, and every motorcycle rider is 100% skillful at operating the machine. And I think this resolution communicates that, and I urge that we make May 2017 Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 38. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 38 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
There is no objection. The current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for a moment of personal privilege.
Request
Request.
granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just like to take a brief moment to introduce some guests we have in the chamber. Motorcycle enthusiasts, certainly, but also advocates for safety, and they represent members of the safety training program called ABATE, which I probably need to take to be able to operate my motorcycle more proficiently. So welcome our guests. Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 42?
Senate Joint Resolution 42 by Senators Martinez, Humanic, and Fields and Representatives Rosenthal and Wist concerning the Colorado Day of Remembrance of the Armenian Genocide on April 26, 2017.
Senator Martinez, Humanic.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move Senate Joint Resolution 17-042 and ask for favorable approval, and we would also like it to be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter.
Senate Joint Resolution 42 by Senators Martinez, Humanic, and Fields and Representatives Rosenthal and Wist concerning the Colorado Day of Remembrance of the Armenian Genocide on April 26, 2017. Whereas this year marks the 102nd anniversary of the first genocide of the 20th century, the Armenian Genocide, when 1.5 million men, women, and children of Armenian descent were victims of a brutal genocide perpetrated by the Turkish Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1923. And whereas, as a result, there are fewer than 75,000 indigenous Armenians living within the borders of modern Turkey today. And whereas the contemporary United States ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, Henry Morgenthau Sr., stated in 1915, "Whatever crimes the most perverted instincts of the human mind can devise, and whatever refinements of persecutions and injustice the most debased imagination can conceive, became the daily misfortunes of this devoted people." And whereas the killing of the Armenian people was followed by the systematic destruction of many of the world's oldest churches, cathedrals, and cross stones, as well as schools, libraries, treasures of art, and cultural monuments, that continues to this day in an attempt to eliminate all traces of a noble civilization with a history of more than 3,000 years. And whereas Colorado newspapers widely reported the extermination of the Armenian people, and Colorado communities generously raised funds to assist the survivors, known at that time as the Starving Armenians, as illustrated in the January 16, 1919 Denver Post front page story titled "Campaign for Armenian Relief is Making Splendid Headway," and a July 30, 1922 Denver Post front page story titled "$60 million from U.S. Keeps Armenians from Extinction." And whereas, in response to the genocide, and at the behest of President Woodrow Wilson and the U.S. State Department, the Near East Relief Organization was founded and became the first congressionally sanctioned American philanthropic effort created exclusively to provide humanitarian assistance and rescue the Armenian nation and other Christian minorities from annihilation. And many of those rescued went on to survive, revive, and thrive outside of their ancestral homeland, all over the world, and specifically in the state of Colorado. And whereas Near East Relief succeeded with the active participation of many Coloradans, including Governor Oliver Shoup, who concurrently served as Colorado State Chairman for Near East Relief in delivering $117 million of assistance and saving more than 1 million refugees, including 132,000 orphans, between 1915 and 1930, by delivering food, clothing, and materials for shelter and setting up refugee camps, clinics, hospitals, and orphanages. And whereas each April, Armenians throughout the world honor their martyrs and commemorate the Armenian genocide, a term first used by Raphael Lemkin, the legal scholar who coined the word genocide and drafted the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, explaining on CBS television in 1949 that he became interested in genocide because it happened to the Armenians and their criminals were not punished. And whereas we commend Armenians of Colorado Incorporated, the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, and other human rights organizations for their ongoing efforts to bring awareness and to educate the community, including our youth, about the Armenian genocide, as illustrated in the recent production of Emmy-winning composer Denise Gentilini's I Am Alive musical. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, and the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we pause in our deliberations to commemorate the 102nd anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, which was formally recognized at a memorial service at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, April 23, 2017, at the Armenian Garden, established in 1982 in the Northeast Quadrant on the State Capitol grounds with a memorial plaque, and renovated and renewed in 2015 with the addition of the Kachkar Memorial, a replica of a destroyed medieval Armenian headstone. That we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby acknowledge April 26, 2017, and April 26 of each year thereafter as Colorado Day of Remembrance of the Armenian Genocide. And that we express support for efforts towards constructive and durable relations between the country of Armenia, the homeland for the Armenian people, and its neighbors, based upon acknowledgement of the facts and ongoing consequences of the Armenian Genocide, and a fair, just, and comprehensive international resolution of this crime against humanity. Be it further resolved, the copies of this joint resolution be sent to the Honorable Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, the members of Colorado's congressional delegation, the members of the Congressional Caucus on Armenian Issues, the Honorable John Hickenlooper, Governor of Colorado, the Armenian Assembly of America in Washington, D.C., the Armenian National Committee of America in Washington, D.C., the Armenian Embassy in Washington, D.C., the Armenian Genocide Museum Institute in Yerevan, Armenia, the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, and Armenians of Colorado Incorporated.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, please be seated. I hope that you will join us on this day of remembrance, on this day, April the 26th, 2017. This is about genocide. And when I think about what happened to 1.5 million in 1915, it was all based on religion. It was based on their faith. And we must never forget, this genocide happened in two stages. First, all able-bodied men were either shot or they were forced into military service, and this was during World War I. Or they worked these folks to death in labor camps. Second were the women and the children and the elderly. They were marched into the desert and denied food and water until they died. As a result, we don't have as many, I can't pronounce the word, Armenians. Sorry, excuse me. When I think about the oppression and the murder that took place, it just really shakes my soul, because I don't believe no person should be murdered or oppressed because of their faith. Freedom of religion is so very important, and that's why we're bringing this resolution for you today, because this kind of harm should never be repeated and it should never be forgotten. When I think about the contributions of the Armenian in Colorado, we have about 5,000 folks who are contributing to the state of Colorado in so many significant ways. First of all, I don't know if you've all heard about the Women's Bank. They are some of the co-founders for defining that bank. Also, the Great American Beer Festival. They are contributors to that. And also, if you've ever been by Mike's Camera, I know I have, and I've had some business there, they're also responsible for that major contribution to the state of Colorado. These folks are survivors, they are persistent, and they want us to never forget what happened as it relates to this genocide.
Senator Martinez-Humanic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we need to remember that we've just recently had another resolution, a memorial to another genocide that occurred. And human beings can be really barbaric to one another. So we need to remember that systematic extermination of peaceful people in the world is just not something that we can tolerate. It should not be happening. And the Armenians had been indigenous and native inhabitants of Turkey for 4,000 years. And they had also been the first nation to accept Christianity as a state of religion in 301 AD. So for more than 100 years, the Christian Armenians were victims of massacres and ethnic cleansing and in the Republic of Turkey and the Independent Republic of Azerbaijan. Certain countries continue to deny that this genocide occurred, but we know it did. And we need to make sure that we always remember the horror that was experienced by peoples, not only in Europe, but in Turkey, and we not perpetuate that type of thinking or actions again in our lifetimes. And we ask for your support on this Senate Joint Resolution.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Koufalis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of this resolution, SJR 42, and I'm happy to stand here in solidarity and in support of the Armenian community in Colorado and folks in the United States. One of the reasons is that our heritage, Greek Armenian heritage, we share aspects of our history in relation to Turkey, and so I don't think we experienced the magnitude of persecution. I know we did not experience the magnitude of persecution that Armenians have experienced, but in terms of my ancestors, there has been much violence perpetrated over the years. So that's one really important reason that I stand here before you. I also think it's important to note that, as has been alluded to and stated, Armenians have a long history in the state of Colorado since the 19th century. They have contributed in many ways, besides contributing to the Great American Beer Festival, and whether it's businesses, long-standing businesses, or in so many other ways. So that support is there. And it's also important to note that the United States has been very supportive of Armenia. I don't know if people are aware that, based on the information that was provided to me, some examples of Armenian support for the United States is that Armenians have contributed to U.S. peacebuilding activities in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo, Lebanon, and Mali. And I think that's important for folks to know. The second largest U.S. embassy in the world is in Armenia. And finally, America has been very supportive, certainly when the genocide occurred, been very supportive of welcoming refugees to this country, children and adults. And I think that is in our DNA in America. And I hope we can learn from what we have done in the past and do our best to be as welcoming as we can be in the current times when many people are being displaced from other parts of the world. Thank you.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of this. The Armenian genocide that happened in the early 1900s is a great example of what happens when governmental power runs amok. If you look at history and when you study this and you realize that the fall of the Sultan and the rise of the Young Turks, or the CUP in Armenia, created some things, some wheels started turning. One of the big issues I think that we have when we talk about, and one of the things I know that always drives me to be focused on individual liberty and the importance of that individual liberty, is the fact that government can run amok. And if people get in power, the wrong people get in power, we can lose our rights and our humanity very quickly, and that's exactly what happened. So when the Young Turks took over the wheels of power, one of the first things they did was eliminate or limit the ability of certain groups to be able to defend themselves, and the Armenians were the major target. So there were a number of laws that were issued, and basically many firearms were actually rounded up from Armenian villages. Without any ability to protect themselves, when government turned against its own people, the Armenians were left in a very bad situation. And so it was very then easy to take the men away, and when the men were gone and the firearms were gone, there was no one to protect the women and the children, and the genocide happened after that. So colleagues, these are great lessons for us to learn, and we should never forget the suffering of the Armenian people, and we should never forget the reason that we're always going to stand first and steadfast in our country for individual rights and the rights of every individual to protect themselves.
Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was done to the Armenian people was mindlessly cruel and thoroughly evil. So let us never forget what they endured at the hands of human beings.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I rise in support of this resolution, and it comes right on the heels just a couple of days after we did the Holocaust resolution. And I won't tell you the story of living in Sudan and with my dad and his work there trying to get clean water in places like Kordofan and Darfur that we've all heard of, and presidents. He's not the first president to fail to use the word genocide. I hope he will be the last president to fail to use the word genocide. Words matter, and I think we should make sure, as we are all stepping up and making sure that we are using that word in this resolution, I think our leaders in Washington should do the same. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 42. Senator Martinez-Humanic.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we request a roll call vote?
Yes, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 42. A roll call vote has been requested. And I assume, Senator, that you would like the chimes to ring out in honor of those who were...
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
that we are honoring through this resolution. Mr. Carpenter, would you please call the roll of the senators, and the chimes will ring out.
Senators Aguilar. Aguilar, aye. Baumgardner. Baumgardner, aye. Cook. Cook, aye. Coram. Coram, aye. Court. Court, aye. Crowder. Crowder, aye. Donovan. Donovan, aye. Finberg. Finberg, aye. Fields.
Aye.
Fields, aye. Garcia. Garcia, aye. Gardner. Gardner, aye. Guzman. Guzman, aye. Hill. Hill, aye. Holbert. Holbert, aye. John. John, aye. Jones. Jones, aye. Kagan. Kagan, aye. Kafalis. Kafalis, aye. Kerr. Kerr, I. Lambert. Lambert. I. Lumberg. Lumberg. I. Marble. Marble. I. Martinez Humenick. Martinez Humenick. I. Merrifield. Merrifield. I. Moreno. Moreno. I. Neville. Neville. I. Priola. Priola. I. Scott. Scott. I. Smallwood. Smallwood. I. Sonnenberg. Sonnenberg. I. Tate. Tate. I. Todd. Todd. I. Williams. Williams. I. Zinzinger. Zinzinger. I. Mr. President.
Aye.
Mr. President. Aye.
With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 42 is adopted. Senators Martinez, Humenick, and Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. We ask that the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Without objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Colleague, Senator Fields, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, members, for your attention today. There are some special guests that are here today. I will not mention their names based on our rules, but I would like to at least mention their titles. And if you could just wave at us, that would be great.
Senator Fields, they are subjects of this resolution today, so you may mention them by name if you please.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have the president of the Armenian of Colorado, Sonia, here. Would you wave at us? We also have the co-founder of the Armenians of Colorado here, Ms. Pearl. Thank you for being here today. And then also we have the Armenian National Committee of the Western Region delegation here. There's no name, so I'm not quite sure who that. Thank you for being here. Then we have the executive director here from Los Angeles. Will you wave at us? And we also have board members also visiting from LA. Will you all wave at us if you're here? Thank you. And then also we have the community development coordinator, Simon, here as well. Simon, will you wave at us? Thank you so very much for bringing this tribute to us.
Colleagues, let's take just a few moments in recess and we will greet our guests and then we'll proceed on with business. We ready? Senate will come back to order. Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Carpenter. Excuse me, no, we are on memorials. We proceeded out of order for resolutions and memorials, and we are now on the memorials. So, Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title to Senate Memorial 2?
Senate Memorial 2 by Senators Hill and Garcia, memorializing Congress to hold the United States Department of Veterans Affairs accountable.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, please don't worry about standing up for this, but I will ask that it be read at length. I do ask, though, that you listen to it and focus on it because we're talking about an important issue really shaping the future of our veterans care here in the United States. With that, Mr. President, I move Senate Memorial 17002 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter.
Senate Memorial 2 by Senators Hill and Garcia, concerning memorializing Congress to hold the United States Department of Veterans Affairs accountable. Whereas Colorado is home to more than 400,000 veterans, and whereas the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, spent more than $3.5 billion on health care and benefits for Colorado veterans in 2015, and whereas 2 years ago, Congress and the VA implemented a $16 billion program to drastically decrease the amount of time veterans wait for health care, yet today, veterans wait longer than ever to see a provider. And whereas the VA is having trouble attracting doctors, a recent survey showed that only 1.9 to 2.5% of physicians found government or military employment a desirable practice setting. And whereas the shortage of providers and subsequent lack of care is reflected in the fact that the rate of suicide is 21% higher for veterans and has increased by 32% since 2001. And whereas, on average, 20 veterans commit suicide every day. And whereas, until recently, the VA was treating chronic pain almost exclusively with opioids, resulting in an addiction and fatal overdose rate among veterans that is almost double the national average. And whereas all America's veterans have unique needs, and the VA should refocus its work and prioritize veterans with service-connected disabilities and specialized needs. And whereas the VA has repeatedly come under fire from veterans groups and lawmakers for its failure to punish corrupt employees and address the system-wide failure that has resulted in false, misleading wait times and serious medical care issues. And whereas 2 measures to hold the VA accountable for its egregious lack of service to and neglect of the nation's veterans passed unanimously out of the United States House of Representatives but remain stalled in the Senate. And whereas Congress must act to hold all VA employees responsible, particularly those in leadership roles. And whereas documented cases of whistleblower retaliation continue to plague the VA, exposing the harassment and attempted bribery of former VA employees who have brought the department's failures to light. And whereas the VA needs much stronger whistleblower protections, as ideas for system-wide change and reform need to come from within, and those who expose abuse and waste should be protected. And whereas, as the demographics of America's veterans rapidly change, their system of care needs to change as well to ensure high-quality, consistent health care and benefits for all veterans. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado that we, the members of the Senate, in recognition of the need to hold the United States Department of Veterans Affairs accountable for the health care of our nation's veterans, declare that the United States Congress must pass reforms that prioritize our country's servicemen and women over bureaucracy to ensure that those who risk everything for our country receive the best care possible. Be it further resolved that copies of this memorial be sent to David Shulkin, United States Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Major General Michael A. Lowe, Adjutant General of Colorado, members of the United States House Committee on Veterans Affairs, members of the United States Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and the members of Colorado's congressional delegation.
Senator Garcia, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you can please be seated. Being the senator from Pueblo, I want to bring your attention to Pueblo being the home of the heroes, along with the 4 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients that our community is known for. We also are a community that's vibrant in the sense of all the service members that have joined in serving in the armed forces. As a Marine veteran who served in Iraq as a mortuary affairs specialist in 2003, it gives me great pride and honor to join my colleague here in this resolution urging Congress to hold the United States Department of Veterans Affairs accountable. And my story is not unique in the sense that Colorado is home to 400,000 veterans, and this memorial is important to our veterans community and how we are approaching the health care crisis that our veterans are experiencing every single day in not only this state, but this country. When they come home from their military service and are in the process of transitioning to civilian life, it's something that they should not be experiencing. One of the approaches that we need to combat in this, one thing that we could be doing is urging the Department of Veterans Affairs to be held accountable and for them to seek reform from within. Especially for those who have served this great nation. You know, sadly, 20 veterans a day commit suicide. Many veterans are struggling with addiction from the medications that are being prescribed to them for pain management. More and more veterans are seeing longer and longer wait times to see a medical professional or mental health services, or especially in rural Colorado, they can't even be able to see those services. And the shortage that we're seeing for attracting and retaining healthcare professionals is growing. The list of the challenges for the VA system goes on, and the VA has repeatedly come under fire from veterans organizations to veterans, citizens, lawmakers. You know, it's important that this is not the first time, nor do I think it will be the last time that we call out the VA for some of their inactions, but I think it's important that we remind them to live up to their motto. We must prioritize our country's servicemen and women over bureaucracy and ensure that those who are willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice are treated with the utmost respect. And finally, Mr. President, I would add that I will close with this by reminding us of the VA. There are two plaques that flank the headquarters of the Department of Veterans Affairs office there in Washington, D.C. And these words are shared there. We share this responsibility, and these are words from President Abraham Lincoln. It says, quote, "To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, and for his orphan."
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we worked hard in crafting this memorial, and there's some important statistics in here that I want to point out as you're talking to veterans within your communities, your town halls. As these issues come up, I want you to know that right now this has not been a challenge of money. In Colorado, we estimate we spend about $3.5 billion. Now, this is federal money. This is not part of our budget. $3.5 billion on health care and benefits for Colorado veterans. That number is from 2015. Several years ago, we implemented a $16 billion program to drastically decrease the amount of times veterans have to wait for health care, and yet they wait longer than ever to see a provider right now. We all know the statistic about 20 veterans committing suicide every day, the opioid addiction and abuse challenges, and there are several measures out there. This is not something that's beyond, these aren't a whole set of new ideas. Two measures have literally passed unanimously out of the U.S. House. It's time to get those going in the Senate. And maybe the one, if you ask what can be done about this, because many times people ask me as a veteran, someone who's studied these issues, Owen, what can we do about this? I say it's time for us to refocus our attention on those men and women who have specific service-related challenges resulting from their time in service. That's the role, that's the task of the VA going forward, and recognizing we have amazing hospitals, amazing doctors, and other resources here in Colorado for some of the more routine things. We need to focus on treating our service members with service-related injuries and disabilities. I think that needs to be our focus going forward. It's a growing trend nationally that we talk about. So when folks ask, and when we have veterans talk to you about this, know that there are solutions out there, and those solutions require us to renew our focus on the veterans and what they've given them. And Mr. President, I'll just finish with a reminder. At the Air Force Academy, we did have to memorize this quote, and I still remember it today, where John Stuart Mills says, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things, the decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling that thinks that nothing is worth Nothing is worth war is much worse. As the soldier has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men, and I'll add, and women, than himself. And we live in that today. We have examples of those who are the better men and women who make us and keep us free. And it is our moral duty to make sure that as they come back, as they transition back into civilian life, that we have their back, that we will provide and protect and honor their service. And this memorial, Mr. President and colleagues, is just another one of the ways we can do that.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I rise in support of Senate Memorial 002. I am so appreciative of the two gentlemen, my fellow senators, who have served, who've stepped up and served our nation. I thank you for bringing this memorial today. Being a resident of Aurora, I can't help but look at one of the greatest embarrassments, I think, of the VA, and that is the VA hospital that has been under the building process for such a long time. I can remember going to hearings at Fitzsimmons when Wayne Allard and Ken Salazar were our senators, and listening to them fight for and continuing to advocate for bringing in veterans after veterans after veteran groups to the forefront to have those discussions about how do we keep moving this forward. In the 13 years I've been down here, there have been at least 6, if I'm counting right, secretaries of the Department of Veterans Affairs. That shows me it's not a Democrat, it's not a Republican issue. It is an issue of inefficiency. It is an issue of not getting the job done. If you've not visited the VA hospital over on 9th and Colorado in that vicinity, that hospital is as old as I am. It was built, I believe, the same year I was built. And when we visited some of the patients, and they were sharing rooms, and the facility was clean, and they were doing as well as they could, but they had things set up in the hall to try to deal with and use for treatment centers for the patients. These are our veterans who have served our country and have served our country well. I'm proud of the fact that at Fitzsimmons Hospital, you can still go and visit and see where Dwight Eisenhower was treated when he had his heart attack. It's been memorialized. It's a great facility to go and visit. That was then, this is now, and when the VA hospital actually opens, it will be under capacity. We will not be able to even host and hold all of the needs that we have because it's a regional hospital. So what is being brought forward in terms of the treatment of our veterans is real. It is absolutely essential that we do rise up, that we do not look away, but that we do speak up and that we do hold the VA accountable. So again, I thank you both for your service as well as bringing the memorial today. Thank you very much.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues, for spending some time this morning on this important issue. From the incredibly tragic rising rate of suicide among our vet population to the story after story that we hear of sub-quality health care, and to the frustrations of rural vets trying to access health care, and they just get faced with bureaucracy after bureaucracy, even though they're trying to access even the simplest of care. We know these problems. I also know the problems from getting calls from constituents that have finally got where they have nowhere else to turn because they're so frustrated by the process of trying to access health care. I also note from watching my grandfather, who was a career Army vet, and in his final years when he needed increased care, the situation that he found when he visited VA hospitals. All of these stories are unacceptable. And if we can identify the problems, then it would seem that a solution shouldn't be far behind, but we just continue to identify more problems and talk about issues. There have been suggestions of how to solve these problems, but there seems to be inaction. We've made a promise, and we must do better. And I just really want to thank the sponsors for bringing forward this resolution that has important and strong language that was thoughtful. And so thank you for doing that today.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Marble?
Thank you, Mr. President. This really hits home to my family, and I just want to relay to you an incident that happened not too long ago where my son ended up with a medical emergency in a VA hospital. He couldn't hardly walk and barely made it in, sat around after they looked at him for 8 hours, 8 hours, in a hallway with no assistance. And then when they finally, oh, you're still here. Well, where the heck is he going to go? He can't walk. They said finally, you know, we can't treat you. You're going to have to take yourself to the public hospital. So he did, where he sat for 4 days and had IVs with antibiotics the VA wouldn't help him with and wouldn't even tell him in a decent amount of time as the infection began to grow worse and worse over those 8 hours. Never gave him any painkillers, never gave him anything to help treat because they didn't know what it was. But they didn't have the decency to tell him right away. This happens all the time. And yes, I do agree with the other senator who came up and said that she also receives complaints from her constituents. So do I. I don't know any of us who don't. And this couldn't be better written. With everything that we have, these are the sons and daughters of America, and we should treat them as such. And you know what? Our VA hospitals are an abomination to what has been given by our military personnel. And I am so in favor of this and cannot thank the sponsors enough.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also stand in support of SM 17002. You know, the part of the problem we have with, well, there's been a few things up here that have been said that I tend to disagree with about the VA hospital. The VA hospital in itself is exactly what we need. It's not an abomination to the state. The problem was a bureaucratic process to get us to that hospital was the problem. So I do not think we should cross over on exactly what, you know, we should be grateful for that VA hospital. But you need to be aware, in the state of Colorado, there's only one VA hospital. Unless they got one in Grand Junction, I'm not sure. But the reality is, most of rural Colorado, we rely on clinics. You know, it is a complex problem. You know, the last data I seen on the VA was there were 7,000 doctors short in the United States, which does put a lot of burden on especially our clinics. That's why we have moved toward the idea of using nurse practitioners where we can or other providers. But the reality is there's a lot of, on any emergency, unless you have to be qualified. Just because you're a veteran, that doesn't mean that you have access to VA hospital. The VA hospital, you know, you have to sign up. There's about 7 different layers or levels, and even any veteran anywhere, if there's a medical emergency, you automatically go to the nearest hospital. That may or may not be a VA hospital, but the problem, the biggest problem with the VA too, or another large problem, it's a political football. There's not enough money that you can throw at this to fix the problem. You know, it's not about, it's about getting the right personnel in place, hire the doctors. I think even this resolution indicates the low difference in what people think of being a doctor in the VA system. Because you have to realize what it's like to be a doctor in the VA. Even in our clinics, the phones ring continuously. It is very, it's hard work for a doctor in a VA clinic and or hospital. We have, I think the biggest thing we can do is somewhat, we need to figure a way to, and there is a program in the VA that you can go to a civilian hospital and the VA will pay for it, but you have to go through a contractor, and this has always been the problem. There's one contractor in the United States, and they're split in the Mississippi, that dictates if that VA will cover the cost of the veterans in a private hospital. And that's always been the problem. It's more so with the contractor. Where I fault Washington is not being able to take control of this contract. To say, okay, if your needs are to be met at a civilian hospital, you go there. And then you got to realize the VA only pays Medicare rate, so that creates another problem. But there's a lot of issues, and to be honest, we've made a lot of advances on this, but it continues to be a political football that will, create situations like we've seen here in Denver, where you had $1 billion price tag. But the hospital itself is very much needed, but the bureaucracy to get to that point is what needs to be looked at. So I look very much forward. I think that the new VA hospital is opening this coming year, and we're very much looking forward to it. The existing VA in Colorado has outlived its usefulness. And I will tell you one brief story. I was, just prior to this session starting, I made an appointment with the VA in Alamosa, and I just got a call this week that's saying, well, we have to change your appointment. So, in November, I made the appointment for the end of session, or the week of May 9th. Now that same appointment is turned into July. So it does take a long time to, but the reality is we always have that civilian component there that we need to rely on in an emergency. But anyway, I do support the resolution. It will be an ongoing fight, and I'm glad to see I have two military advocates here, albeit a Marine and an Air Force guy. But other than that, thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? Motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Memorial 2. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Memorial 2 is adopted. Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ask for use of the current roll call as co-sponsors.
Without objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsor. Senator Hill.
Thanks again, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege to introduce a couple of veterans who are really bringing light to this issue, as well as helping folks in the transition process make sure they don't fall through the bureaucracy.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I wonder if we might just acknowledge and recognize, if you'll stand up when I introduce you and just say hello. Lexi Wagnold is a major in the U.S. Army, age 64, Delta Attack Longbow helicopter pilot, operations officer in the U.S. Army Reserve, and is now the state administrator of Team Rubicon, which is this neat organization, a nonprofit combining veterans, first responders, and civilians to help communities on their worst days. Garrett Prater, recently honorably discharged in the U.S. Navy, flew the T-6B Texan and was a division officer for an intel unit, is actually now looking for full-time employment in supply chain operations management. Sean Hansen, again, recently honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy, is EOD guy, explosive ordnance disposal, right? This is the guy disarming those IEDs in Iraq. He hosts Guard the Guardians, is a podcast with one main mission: helping veterans, active military, first responders, and their families live better lives. Dustin Kissling Navy SEAL recently honorably discharged operations in support of OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom. And now is project management of a startup company, an avid outdoorsman, and a backcountry skier. And colleagues, especially I want to highlight Rex Laceby here. USMC, we won't hold that against him. Prior enlisted Marine officer. Guys, Rex, infantry Marine, force recon officer, and he's really on the forefront of this challenge in the education world. He works at CU Boulder, helping veterans in transition, and the vice president of the Colorado Advisory Council on Military Education. So many of our veterans colleagues, when they come back, they've got a very generous GI Bill. The education sphere is the transition point for so many of our veterans these days. And so there's this intersection between Veterans Affairs and taking care of our veterans and our education system. And Rex gave up many other options to say this is where he can continue the fight with his brothers and sisters in arms by taking really just I don't want to say it's entry level because it's so important, but taking an entry level salary to go and focus on this at CU, helping our veterans as they transition out to become now productive members of our society. Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues, for your attention this morning.
Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment as personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to start off by thanking my colleague from the branch of service who shall not be named. But I would like to thank him for his commitment for fighting for veterans and the service that he's given to this country. I'd also like to recognize two who join us from Southern Colorado, Sean Gibson from the Veterans Upward Bound program at Public Community College, and Jacobo Varela from the Director of Veterans Upward Bound at CSU Pueblo. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, colleagues, we are going to proceed on into third reading, I believe. Okay. Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title to all the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar?
Senate Bill 271 by Senator Cook and Representative Bone, concerning the development of a transparent process by which an investor-owned utility may recover actual costs from a property owner on whose behalf the utility has extended the service by connecting the property owner's property to the utility service. House Bill 1004 by Representative Michelson, Janae, and Danielson, and Senators Hale and Garcia, concerning a statewide policy for rewarding college credit for military education and training.
Assistant Majority Leader Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the following bills on third reading consent calendar for final passage: Senate Bill 271 and House Bill 1004.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar? The motion is for the adoption of all the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 271 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Smallwood, Senator Gardner, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Scott, Senator Tate, Senator Martinez-Humenick. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1004 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Gardner, Senator Lambert, Senator Smallwood, Senator Lundberg, Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Crowder, Senator Tate, Senator Neville, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Marble, Senator Cook, Senator Scott, Senator John, Senator Merrifield, Senator Todd, Senator Williams, Senator Aguilar, Senator Moreno, Senator Court, Senator Fenberg, Senator Kafalas, Senator Fields, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Jones, Senator Kagan, Senator Priola, Senator Donovan, Senator Kerr. Please add the president. Third reading of bills. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of the Senate Bill 138.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Tate and Representative Foote concerning the role of election watchers in connection with the conduct of elections.
System Majority Leader Scott.
Mr. President, I move that we lay over Senate Bill 138 until the end of the third reading bill's calendar to follow Senate Bill 291.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 138 to the end of the third reading of bill's calendar to follow Senate Bill 291. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that will be laid over to the end of the third reading of bill's calendar. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 289.
Senate Bill 289 by Senator Gardner and Representative Lawrence concerning allowing the Department of Human Services to transfer custody of certain adult offenders from the Division of Youth Corrections upon a court order.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 289 on third reading and final passage.
Senator Kagan.
Members, just to ask you to make a no vote on this bill, which resentences somebody who has previously been sentenced to probation at the behest of the Division of Youth Services, to resentence them after their sentence of probation has been handed down by a judge to prison because the Division of Youth Services feel they can't handle him. That is a decision for a judge to make. Please vote no.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill was brought at the request of the Department of Youth Corrections to deal with the very serious problem of those committed to DYC between the ages of 18 and 21. At that age, while in DYC, if that individual commits a serious crime in DYC, it's very possible that they will simply be returned to DYC. So if the victim is another juvenile, as it often is, if the victim is one of the officers working there at DYC, this juvenile, as often as not, is being returned to the courts. What this bill does is give DYC the ability to request the transfer to adult jail, to DOC. It's very simple and very straightforward in what it is trying to do, and the reason it is trying to do it, I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Kagan.
Members, what the esteemed chair of the Judiciary Committee has just said is true. But what he has not said is that at the time of the adult sentencing, the sentencing judge knows that this individual is in the custody of the Division of Youth Corrections. At the time of the sentencing, which is presumably to probation, at the time of the sentencing, the Division of Youth Corrections has the right, has the ability, and has the practice of going to the judge and saying to the judge, when you sentence this individual, bear in mind he was at DYC, we don't think we can be of any more use to him at DYC, so judge, at his initial sentencing, please sentence him as an adult, which he is being tried on as an adult, sentence him to prison. And the only time this bill comes into play is when a judge has already heard that plea at sentencing, has already decided that the appropriate sentence is probation and therefore a return to DYC. After the judge has made that determination, that's the only time this comes in. The DYC under this bill gets another bite at the apple. But it's not as if they didn't have the first. They had the opportunity to make these representations to the sentencing judge at the time of sentencing on the adult charge. They made those representations. I asked them in committee, do you not go to the court and ask the judge at the sentencing to send this individual to prison rather than to DYC? And they said, yes, we go. And what they said was, but the judges don't do it often enough. And what the esteemed chair of the Judiciary Committee said was, right, that's why this bill is needed, because the judges aren't doing it enough. And the esteemed chair of the Judiciary Committee said, what we could do, if there are constitutional problems with this, is we could make it a mandatory minimum requirement in cases where the person was in DYC, that they be incarcerated in prison. So you see what this bill is trying to do. It is trying to force our judges, or to push our judges, or to encourage our judges to send more DYC inmates to prison on charges, some of which are misdemeanors, to a sentence of incarceration if the DYC wants that. That is not something we should countenance.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 289? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 289. Are there any no votes? Senator Jones, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Fields, Senator Kafalis, Senator Garcia, Minority Leader Guzman, Senator Fenberg, Senator Kerr, Senator Court, Senator Donovan, Senator Kagan, Senator Moreno, Senator Aguilar, Senator Williams, Senator Todd, Senator Merrifield, Senator John. With 18 ayes, 17 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 289 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Cook, Senator Crowder, Senator Smallwood, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Lambert. Please add the President. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1190.
House Bill 1190 by Representative Becker Kay and Senator Sonnenberg, concerning the limited applicability of the Colorado Supreme Court's decision in St. Jude's Company versus Roaring Fork Club, LLC, 351P, 3rd 442, Colorado Supreme Court, 2015.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1190 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1190? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1190. Are there any no votes? Senator Aguilar, Senator Kafalis, Senator Garcia, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Merrifield, Senator Fenberg, Senator Moreno, Senator Kagan, Senator Todd, Senator Williams, Senator Kerr, Senator Jones. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1190 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Scott, Senator Crowder, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Cook. Please add the President. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 291.
Senate Bill 291 by Senator Martinez-Humenick and Representative Bridges, concerning continuation of the School Safety Resource Center Advisory Board.
Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move on third reading Senate Bill 17291 and ask for favorable approval.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 291? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 291. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 291 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Moreno, Senator Williams, Senator Todd, Senator Merrifield, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Fields, Senator Hill, Senator Fenberg, Senator Gardner, Senator Cook, Senator Kerr, Senator Jones, Senator Kafalas, Senator Lambert, Senator Priola. Please add the President. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 138.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Tate and Representative Foote concerning the role of election watchers in connection with the conduct of elections.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. At long last, I kindly move Senate Bill 138 and request permission to run third reading amendments.
Question before the body is permission to run a third reading amendment.
Quantity 3.
Would you please explain your request for running a third?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 amendments today. One is a reworking of amendment we discussed last week at length that firmed up transparency provisions. But in terms of the amendment being different, a couple things were removed from the bill that were contentious in terms of, getting in the weeds of how our election officials conduct elections. This amendment, though, does firm things up in terms of transparency and watcher abilities to participate in all steps of the election. There was a concern from my colleague from Aurora who had worked to prepare an amendment related to narrowing the scope of the background checks. And so I have an amendment that accomplishes that. And then finally, an amendment that narrows what the information are that are subject to the background checks. So that's the reason for all this. This is the end of the line where everything's on the table. I encourage and I vote on being able to offer amendments.
Senator Tate, we get to do these one at a time. Permission and amendment, permission and amendment.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
which one are we
President.
running
I
for?
move to have permission to offer a third reading amendment, specifically L021, which I'll move momentarily.
The motion before us is permission to run a third reading amendment, specifically in this case, Amendment L021. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it and permission is granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L021.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, just to provide some reiteration, this does put in the bill language that the General Assembly's intent is to have a fully transparent and verifiable election process. It defines witness and verify elections as to without hindrance, obstruction, or unreasonable delay. It doesn't set a minimum number of watchers, but allows the Secretary of State, through rulemaking, to maximize what's practical in terms of watching. It clarifies that what the conduct of the election is in terms of election officials and voting systems. Currently, we're waiting on an amendment momentarily that narrows in the bill the applicability of the background check provision. A contentious provision also is related to the watcher oath, and that's been narrowed back down to the traditional statutory provision of when results of the election can be announced. That's after the polls close. And finally, provides a escalation provision to the Secretary of State rather than immediately seeking recourse. Urge an aye vote on L021.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. In looking at this amendment, which we've had on our desks, is kind of complicated. There's plenty in there. I think there are some improvements that are made. I'm more than a little bit uncomfortable giving the Secretary of State the authority to actually establish how many watchers can be where. I am wondering what that really means. It simply means that we punt when it comes to that side, as I see it at least. In page 1 of the amendment, it does say the appointing authority, which I take to mean the campaign or the political party or the issue committee who is wanting the watching to occur for any particular election, can determine the number of watchers, but when the Secretary of State then has the authority to promulgate rules as to what that means, it could be a problem. I'm not saying vote no on the amendment, but I am certainly expressing a concern I have that, in fact, we'll be back at this later, trying to do what I would hope this bill would do ultimately, which is to give watchers the authority to watch. And I'm concerned that we're not quite there, but this amendment does seem to have some elements that are going the right direction.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for your concerns. I just want to allay some related to the Secretary of State's rulemaking and number of watchers. They do that right now. That happens right now. The bill basically establishes that in rulemaking that they are to maximize the ability to do watching or have watchers at the maximum practical amount. But I just want to let everyone know that watching right now in terms of quantity is already subject to rulemaking. Thank you.
For a matter of procedure and order, Mr. Carpenter, would you please read Amendment L021?
Amendment L0.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I also want to thank the good senator from Centennial for his tenacity and his hard work on the Senate Bill 138. I really appreciate also the language that's put in the bill to address some standards and some procedures as it relates to background checks. But my question is similar to the question that just was posed to you in reference to how we've changed now the number of watchers per precinct to say now to appoint significant or sufficient watchers. And so there's no really definition for what sufficient is in the language. It just gives that authority to the Secretary of State. And so I was wondering why the language changed.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleague for that question. Currently, the only provision in statute that establishes a quantity is a watcher watching at a precinct voting location. It's not a quantity determination or calculation. The current statute realizes that we have, we used to have, precinct voting locations, and there would be a watcher at each precinct voting location. That is now an obsolete rendering of where watchers can watch. And so if you look in the legislative declaration of the amendment, the last, and that's line 15 through 18, Amendment L021, you'll see a clarification on sufficient, And the appointing authority is to be heavily involved in determining what a sufficient number is, because we do not have precinct-level voting locations any longer. Thank you for bringing that concern to the front.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L021? Motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L021. Are there any no votes? Senator Merrifield, Senator Fenberg, Senator Todd, Senator Kerr, Senator Court, Senator Garcia, Senator John, Senator Williams, Senator Aguilar, Senator Kafalis, Minority Leader Guzman, Senator Kagan, Senator Fields, Senator Moreno, Senator Zinzinger, Senator Jones, Senator Donovan. With 18 ayes, 17 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Amendment L021 is adopted. Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request permission to run a third reading amendment, specifically momentarily L020.
Question before the body is permission to run a third reading amendment, specifically Amendment L020. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it, and permission is granted. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L020.
Amendment L020.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L020. This amendment is related to the narrowed background check provision that my colleague from Aurora had expressed concern about last week. The previous provision was very broad, potentially restrictive, and could theoretically be used in a manner to restrict the ability of watchers to participate in certain steps of the conduct of the election. So this amendment is related to narrowing that to a very specific purpose of the background check related to voter private information. Urge and I vote on Amendment L020.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, the senator from Centennial, for bringing this amendment to have some limitations regarding the background checks. I really do appreciate that. And so now my question is regarding line 9 on this amendment, which talks about the county clerks and recorders may have discretion in reference to conducting and requesting a criminal history record. And I'm wondering why it's not just a standard. The discretion just means that some folks can do it and then some people can choose not to do it. Is that because some clerks don't think it's necessary and then others do? I'm just wondering what's the logic behind the word discretion.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L020? Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was wondering if the senator from Centennial, out of courtesy, would respond to my question.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L020? Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I guess my concern with Amendment L020 is that it says if a watcher has been convicted of election fraud or an election offense, they can still be a watcher, okay? But just can't have access to certain records. That seems a little absurd to me, that someone could be convicted of election fraud and yet still be allowed to be a watcher, just we're going to limit the access that they have to certain information. That concerns me.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll not be very long on this, but I'm supporting this amendment. I don't like the idea that we actually set this standard in place at all for watchers. I think it adds more stuff to it, but frankly, if you look at the bill, it's so much more open-ended that this amendment, at least to its credit, does tighten it up significantly, and that's why I'm supporting the amendment. The concern I have is to require the watchers to have a background check is a great opportunity to slow the process down and make it more difficult for watchers to watch in the first place. Remember, all they're doing is watching, and the information that they have to see is first they take an oath to not provide any of this information until after the election, and number two, the amount of information that they're having to watch, it doesn't allow for much mischief to occur, if any, at all, that might be envisioned here. It's an amendment that goes the right direction, so I'm supporting the amendment, but it's still troubling that we have this whole concept that we are going to be, giving this discretion to clerks and slowing the process down for watching.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L020? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L020. Are there any no votes? Senator Jones, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Fields, Minority Leader Guzman, Senator Todd, Senator John, Senator Merrifield, Senator Kerr, Senator Kafalis, Senator Court, Senator Williams, Senator Garcia, Senator Aguilar. I got you, Senator Kafalis. Senator Fenberg, Senator Kagan, Senator Moreno, Senator Donovan. With 18 ayes, 17 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Amendment L020 is adopted. Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I withdraw my first motion on the bill and hereby move to lay over Senate Bill 138 to May 11th.
There is a motion. It is to lay over Senate Bill 138 to May 11th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. I don't think so. I haven't declared the vote yet, so we need to double check, but I think procedurally we're right in. It's just a layover. Boom. It's a motion that's in order, right? Okay. The ayes have it. General orders. Second reading of bills. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
Motion before the body is to resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of the general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The eye has it, and the motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself in committee of the whole for consideration of the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. Senator Lundberg will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. The court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the titles to all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar?
House Bill 1316 by Representative Valentine and Senator Marble concerning delaying the implementation of House Bill 161309. Senate Bill 293 by Senator Kagan, Representative Lee concerning updating the reference to national standards setting forth certain specifications applicable to the type of paper used to publish the Colorado Revised Statutes. House Bill 1228 by Representative Pabon and Landgraf and Senator Priola concerning licensing exemptions related to pet animal facilities, including those utilizing technology in their business models.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the following bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar, consisting of House Bill 1316, Senate Bill 293, House Bill 1228, and the associated committee reports.
Is there any discussion on the committee report for House Bill 1228? The motion before the body is the adoption of the report to that bill on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, good. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the consent calendar? The motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the general order's second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Assistant Majority Leader Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion is for the body to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes still have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report. That was fun.
Easy one. It's going to break it.
Thank you.
Senate will come to order. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report is that under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, makes the following recommendations are on. Senate Bill 293 passed on second read order and gross place on the counter for their reading and final passage. House Bill 1316, House Bill 1228 as amended, passed on second read order, revised, placed on the counter for their reading and final passage.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the report to the committee of the whole. Are there any no votes? With the vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 293 passed on second reading, ordered engrossed and placed on the counter for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1316, House Bill 1228 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered revised and placed on the counter for third reading and final passage. General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the consideration of the general orders, second reading of bills calendar.
Motion for the body is to resolve itself in committee of the whole for consideration of the general order, second reading of bills calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will resolve itself in committee of the whole for consideration of the general order, second reading of bills calendar, and Senator Lundberg will take the chair.
The committee will come to order, and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 253?
Senate Bill 253 by Senators Marble and Guzman and Representatives Garnett and McKean concerning increasing the authority for certain providers of alcohol beverages to provide beverages to customers from approved sales rooms.
Senator Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We move Senate Bill 253 and the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there any discussion on the committee report? To the committee report, Senator Marble. Then we'll go to the...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriations 002 Committee report. The first part of it, is regarding putting in temporary tasting rooms, which would give festivals into the mix for the craft brewers. And the second part on Section 3 is no appropriations due to the fact that there is such a decline in licensing for liquor stores since 197 passed, and it entails one page which does not take into account any sort of background check that's already been done. It's just one page, and they should be able to find it within existing appropriations to be able to cover the costs of dealing with one page, which may be $800 in a year.
Okay, is there any further discussion to the committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report for Senate Bill 253. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Marble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill has been appropriately moved, and we just ask for your unanimous support. This is the little bill that could.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 253. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Very good. The ayes clearly have it, and the bill is passed. Senator Assistant Majority Leader Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report.
Senate will come to order. Senator Lindberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had one bill under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report has had under consideration the following task bills being the second read thereof, makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 253 is amended, passed on second read, ordered and gross place calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
Motion before us is the adoption of the report to the committee of the whole. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 253 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered and gross, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Announcements. Let's do message from the House first, and then we'll get into announcements. Message from the House.
The House has adopted and returns herewith Senate Joint Resolution 42. The House has passed on third reading, transmitted to Revised Statutes, House Bill 1317. The House has passed third reading, transmitted to Revised Statutes, House Bill 1320 is amended. House Bill 1276 is amended. House Bill 1284 is amended. House Bill 1285 is amended. House Bill 1296 is amended. House Bill 1306 is amended. House Bill 1336 is amended. House Bill 1276 is amended. House Bill 1340 is amended. House Bill 1331 is amended. The House has passed on third reading, transmitted to Revised Statutes, House Bill 1302, amended is printed in the House Journal April 25, 2017, and amended on third reading is printed in the House Journal April 26, 2017. The House has voted to grant the House conferees on the first conference committees on Senate Bills 184, 254 to consider matters not at issue between the two houses.
Announcements. Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as promised, there is a flyer on your desk concerning the caucus today at noon. It's the Runaway and Homeless Youth Caucus. And the purpose of this caucus is to look at issues facing youth who are homeless or runaways and to look at how we can prevent that and how we can help mitigate the problems with that. It's from 12 to 1:30 in HCR 109. And today we're focusing on looking forward what we can do to prevent youth homelessness. Lunch will be provided. Hopefully some of you are able to join us. Thank you.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Conference Committee on Senate Bill 254, a.k.a. the Long Bill, will be held tomorrow in the JBC briefing room. That's Thursday at 1:30. Thursday at 1:30. Thank you. The band's back together again. Yeah.
Senator Hill.
Thanks, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're going to start education promptly at 11:30. Ask for y'all to make your way upstairs.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today in the gallery, we have some folks from my district, Brighton Leadership Academy. They're down here to visit us. Give them a big round of applause.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of Senate Judiciary Committee, those of you who may have bills that will be coming before Senate Judiciary Committee, friends in the lobby who may have interest in what comes before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and those of you in Colorado who have some interest in Senate Judiciary Committee. After tomorrow, or after today actually, we will have one full week next week in which we will have scheduled committees. I think after that it becomes very questionable about whether there's further committee time. Therefore, next week, the chair of Senate Judiciary Committee will exercise his prerogative to curtail testimony. We will meet our constitutional requirements, but please, if you have a bill, advise your stakeholders, opponents. Be advised that we will severely limit the time in an effort not to have committees held on 2 different calendar days at one time. Thank you.
Senator Martinez-Humanic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder that everyone in the chamber of my colleagues that so graciously did wear jeans today, make sure that you pay your $5. If you wore your high-top tennis shoes, it's an additional $5. And this is to take a stand against sexual violence day to day. So that's why we are wearing jeans, those of us who chose to.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to show support for this effort, we would like to take a group picture after we're dismissed so that we can show everyone that we here in the Senate chamber supports the reduction and the elimination of sexual assault violence. Thank you.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I wanted to offer my thanks to the Assistant Majority Leader for managing the calendar here. If you didn't notice, he didn't lay over a single bill today.
Yet.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to request a personal moment of privilege.
Granted, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'm quite sure you saw last night that a federal judge blocked the executive order which was to threaten sanctuary cities. I saw that on the news last night, and while I was watching that, I also saw a news report that a mother of 4 children was deported from Aurora, and she's sent back to Mexico, leaving a 15-year-old who is developmentally disabled. The fear of deportation is running rampant in our community. I'm not quite sure if you saw the front page of the Denver Post, but basically what it says is ICE agents are on the streets. And it's demonstrating and it's turning up the volume as it relates with a tremendous amount of fear. Now, the judge blocked this executive order because he said it was illegal and it was unconstitutional. We just passed similar legislation on this floor this week. And I had some young kids here. They were in the gallery, and I was able to have 5 kids along the benches there. And they heard us debate this. And afterwards, I had to look at them, and they had tears in their eyes. Because this was the first time they came down to the Capitol. They were excited. They had confidence. But they left here with that confidence depleted, their dreams shattered, and their hope was gone, and it was replaced by fear. Words that we say down here do matter, and the impression that we left with these young people that were many black and brown kids, they have sisters and brothers who are undocumented. Maybe their parents are undocumented. And what we're doing by the rhetoric that we're talking about is we're generating a sense of fear. And what happens is hard for our law enforcement to police in community when there's this sense of deportation and fear. What's happening is we're driving this immigrant community to the shadows. They're starting to protect themselves because if they see or hear a situation where there might be some kind of domestic violence, they don't feel comfortable calling the police. Because they're afraid if the police comes, it might separate a family member. Our school teachers are having to deal with a high sense of anxiety and uncertainty if their mom or dad are going to be deported. We have people that are being picked up in malls and workplaces, at bus stops. And so what I wanted to do in sharing with you today is that those kids that were here, when they heard us debate, they told me they felt like the conversation was cold-hearted. And that's not the image that I want our young people to have about the work that we do here. I wanted them to leave here with the kind of excitement that they had, but they didn't. They left here with their dreams shattered and a sense of fear in our community. And I think that's shameful.
Any further announcements? Colleagues, if you are wearing jeans today, you are on the honor code to get your $5 up here. And if you are wearing your All-Stars, then you are also on the honor code to get your $5 up here. If you are staff and you happen to wear them, yes, you are also on the hook. And folks, if you did not wear jeans today, you are more than welcome to contribute $5 up here. So take note. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We did have one little small piece of business left. We have had a request to remove House Bill 1207 from Thursday, April 27th calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, consent calendar.
That is noted. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
I move that the Senate recess till 1:30 today. Members, we have some things to read across the desk, so your attendance is not required, and thank you very much for your hard work and attention today.
That's what they told me yesterday.
The motion is to recess until 1:30 p.m. today. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it and will be in recess till 1:30 p.m. today.